So I decided to do something a little different for the channel. Usually I just release my animations on the main channel and I might cover them on panels at conventions, but due to the current climate around generative AI and the corporate nature of animation, it feels like the human aspect that brings animation to life is slowly getting erased. And I decided, what if I actually get to cover it tonight? So first of all, hi, I'm Minty. I am a man. The girl horse is mostly a remnant of a weird era in the early fandom where the stallion OCs looked malformed, and at the time I didn't know any better. I just went with OCs that looked like other OCs. If you look back at my original OC, she looked pretty much just like Vinyl Scratch in green. So a lot of people just assume I'm a girl. It feels strange to look at people talk about my animations and they just assume I'm a girl. I think it's a good opportunity to just showcase how many people don't get to know who makes the animations. So let's talk about them. Let's talk tonight about Bright Eyes and the Thunderclouds, my remake of Project Thundercloud from 2013. And first of all, before actually covering the animation, let's actually cover what made the animation happen in the first place. Project Thundercloud, as the name entails, implies that this was just a concept. And the whole thing comes down to BronyCon 2013. I applied for that back in 2012. The whole idea was, what if I just make it an animation panel where I discuss Flash animation? I had some experience back then, and I was thinking, like, what if I just do a little panel? It was quite inspired by the My Little Pony physics presentation video back then. I was thinking, like, well, I know a bit about Flash, since I've done Flash animation before. The show is animated Flash, so let's just do a little panel where I get to talk about my experience with it. And while I'm at it, let's do a little project that shows some of it. And turns out 2012 was around the time of the Derpy gate. Lots of people were having very mixed feelings. People were thinking that Derpy Hooves would be banished forever because of some rumors that she was no longer allowed in the show. And at the time I was thinking, like, what if I just do a little remake of the scene, the infamous Derpy Gate scene from Over Barrel, but actually following the script and more following closely the vision from Amy Keating Rogers, until it just dawned to me, Derpy Hooves, the way she was seen by the fandom, a lot of people who were actually on the spectrum were feeling a lot of relatability with her. And in my case, I felt a lot of relatability. She felt a lot of people were looking at her dumb just because she was a bit different. And I was thinking, what if I talk a bit about it on a little animation covering her? And I didn't take much of it. I was thinking, okay, let's just do a little tech demo where I show a few things, and as I'm working on that, it's a nice story about Derpy Hooves, or a little backstory. And if you look at it, you're going to notice a lot of it is just narration followed by a few shots that try to justify some techniques. For example, you have crystal ponies who show up because I needed to show how the effect was done, because I wanted to demonstrate some post-production, some After Effects, and how all of it came down while they were working on the TV show. For example, you had some lip sync, you had some 360s, you had some 3D integration because of Timberwolf. So a lot of it was just a tech demo that spoke a bit to me. But as I did the panel that turned out to be a disaster, one of the attendees, a few years later actually, told me that he found it very cringe. It was not wrong. The saving aspect of the whole panel was just this animation, and part of it was just the inspiration to keep making animations. And a lot of things have happened since. I ended up working for a few studios. I worked on my first animated feature film in a studio. I worked for Disney. I made special effects for Aquaman. So lots of things that happened. And while I was working on Missing Out, one of the things that happened was I was thinking, what if I was to look back? Originally, the idea was not even to do a remake of Project Thundercloud. The whole idea was, what if I just did a remaster of Luna's Determination? And then I realized, well, Luna's Determination is fine. What if I actually cover something like Project Thundercloud. And as I was making the idea in my head, the whole story flew completely. Just the idea that what if Derpy Hooves has to face something that she's been escaping. So I can't just say that Project Thundercloud remake is just a remake of the original one. It's a whole new vision that's, I say a decade in the making because it's been over a decade where I assembled a lot of skills that ended up being very helpful for the production. So I'm looking back at it and thinking like, well, let's cover this tonight. So that's a setup that's not too dissimilar to my setup in Brony-S React. So you could say I'm Brony-S reacting to my own content. I hate the term content, but this is the case. I'm reacting to something I've made myself. There's no surprise for me since the whole thing was done by myself. What you are currently looking at is the editing timeline for the full project. Since I act as my own editor for those projects, I have full control over the flow of the project. I have full control over every single clip that goes in. So the project was edited in Adobe Premiere Pro. That's something I've been using for over a decade. Some people will say that it's not the best anymore, but it's something I know, it's something that works. We've seen movies being edited in much worse things, so I think it's perfectly fine. And let's do this. So the very first note I have to point out is the music that you can hear, the very first notes. You hear a theme that Blue Brony came up with. One of the key problems we had with the project when it came to brainstorming was that Project Thundercloud was pretty much just based on commercial music from either from the franchise or from other franchises. So there was not a lot of material to come up with the leitmotifs. We didn't have lots in terms of signature. And when I was talking with Blue Brony, one of the things I was suggesting, partly as a joke but also as an idea that was floating around, is what if we go with the number 7? What if we have a theme that goes with 7 notes that fits Derpy Hooves? And he ended up going with a theme that goes on as the project goes. Blue Brony does incredible work. I will not say that enough. He's been with me since Missing Out. He's been doing incredible work. And it's not just with collaborating with me. He's done incredible work with other people as well. You can also see in this shot, the one opening shot. I love starting with a just pure black shot that gets broken by something. With Luna's Determination was just starting with a fade in to a shot of the moon. With The Fall of Sunset Shimmer, it was the darkness of a wall as the camera panned down to see the opening of the balcony. With The Beginning of Harmony, it was going from the clouds. And with Missing Out, the whole pattern was a shot of the sky seen in a reflection as well, spanning. And with this one, the idea of going from pure black to the reflection of a shiny floor just felt perfect for the opening. One of the key challenges that pure black is impossible. So I had to cheat the material and actually fake the increase in specularity, because you couldn't get something like this unless you cheated in terms of lighting. And it was quite a challenge to get the right look for that. It's not actually reflecting Canterlot. If you look at this, it's actually reflecting just a picture of Canterlot. It's just a lot easier to just render it that way. I can also see the size of the raindrops. You can see the splashes just by scattering animations of a raindrop falling and generating a splash. It's a technique that has been used a lot. Since it was supposed to be happening during heavy rain, the idea of having that kind of heavy weather that felt physical was very important for me. It felt very important to me to prove that it was raining very heavily. Then you get to a shot of the entrance of Canterlot being closed, sort of inspired by the opening in Ocarina of Time. And you can see the way everything splashes on Canterlot. You can see also, it's quite interesting because in the show, since the ponies are supposed to be small, one of the ideas that came was to make the droplets bigger, to make them feel more scary for the ponies. And also, since a lot of people just watch on very small screens, sometimes those droplets would just be not visible. And it's true that if you look at actual rain, you mostly just see the splashes on the ground. You don't get to see it in the sky unless it's very, very intense. So I did exaggerate it a lot. And part of it was also that the droplets, just the rain, I felt would be just crushed by YouTube's compression. It attempts to smooth out a lot of finer detail, and I thought let's exaggerate it in a way where YouTube's compression can't crush it. It was quite a challenge. I ended up having to do a lot of things just to get the YouTube compression not to hurt me too much. Even if the video was done at full native 4K, it was just YouTube just didn't like me for that. Actually, I say that, but YouTube doesn't like me because I'm doing animation. That's been a fight I've had to deal with for a long time. And you can see Derpy hooves, and you can see just a scale of Canterlot. One of the key aspects I wanted to make sure for the look, a lot of those scenes employ a lot of grays and a lot of gold just to fit Derpy hooves. It helped a lot that Canterlot is a lot of purples and yellows. And the whole idea was let's go with that, let's take advantage of that. Let's go with very gray clouds, and it works really well. You can see also that besides this one shot, as Derpy just gets to the ground, in every other shot where she's with Celestia, she's always lower than her on the frame. You can also see all the splashes that hit the character. I ended up building a little system. It only works in screen space, so it's not perfect, but for the needs of the project, it worked perfectly fine. Where the whole idea is it scatters cards of splashes on top of the character, and basically just a system with a mask that just generates it on top. It's a weird contraction in Blender for some reason. I couldn't find a different software that would actually do what I wanted, but the whole idea is it just scatters those splashes on top of the character, and then I can do refraction on top of it, and just helps the look. Everything just feels like the rain hits them, and the fact that the rain hits everything else also really helps to sell the feel. And you're going to also notice the wind in the hair of the characters. For Celestia as a given, it just flows all the time, but for Derpy hooves, the idea is that you have all those strands that are animated individually. And the idea with that is that since they're animated individually, you just add wind separately with different waves and different patterns. And the whole idea is it feels a lot more tangible because it's not just one shape that wiggles. It's different shapes that wiggle together to make a full shape.
Is something wrong?
And then you have the little joker, you have Derpy asking like, is something wrong? And Celestia feels a bit awkward because she looks at her and she says, no. Yes!
I need you to take...
Celestia, played by Anna Chloe M. She did an incredible job. She was already my Celestia for the Fall of Sunset Shimmer.
I thought I was helping, but I was not. I don't know anything about friendship.
She was my stellar glimmer in Missing Out.
I guess I screwed up. I wanted this to be perfect, and I couldn't get it right at all.
And she came back as Celestia in the project. Brittany Ackerman playing Derpy hooves. Definitely not the first choice for Derpy that I thought, but she did an incredible job. I didn't even think about her before because I mostly knew her for Rainbow Dash, but turned out no, she did an incredible job. You can also see in this shot the fact that the clouds are framed from that distance. Funny thing, those clouds, actually I'm going to talk more about those later, but those clouds were actually rendered on a Steam Deck. I ended up needing to render plates while I was away from my home, and I only had my laptop, and my laptop's graphics were terrible. So I ended up doing the whole thing on my Steam Deck. Because the Steam Deck can run Blender, it actually works well as an animation machine. And so a lot of it just was fully done on Steam Deck.
Take this letter to Twilight Sparkle in Ponyville right away.
And a nice little detail that I have is that when she says, this is an emergency, you can feel like she's holding and she's squeezing the scroll. This shot was quite a challenge because I didn't want to cut unnecessarily. I wanted to actually show how imposing Celestia is for
It's an
Derpy.
emergency. Equestria depends
And I needed within the same shot for her to give the scroll.
on it.
I will do what I can.
You have to do your best.
The I will do what I can was actually supposed to be part of a bigger part of the script, ended up being cut out, where the whole idea is that you have Derpy saying like, I will do what I can, and she has to argue with someone else like, no, you have to do your best. And she tries to argue the fact that what she can is her best. But sometimes you find remnants of an older script like that, because those ideas just come and merge together. And sometimes it just helps to give more depth to the characters, where you feel like the way that the words that they choose impact a lot of their decisions, all their backstory. So the fact that she said like, I will do what I can, is a lot more real for her than saying I will do my best. And you can even see better in this shot the impact of the rain on her. And in this shot, you'll notice it's very, very subtle, but you see black bars actually come from the top and the bottom as the aspect ratio changes. And you can see this is not just black bars that appear by sliding. I actually made the composition a lot wider. If you look at the unlisted but available version that's made for ultra-wide displays, the screen actually widens. It was a bit of a challenge to actually make those already very high resolution images at an even wider aspect ratio. But the effect it gives as it widens is incredible. In this case, for example, the model of Canterlot, it's mostly based on the model that I had back on Missing Out, which had a lot of improvements from the one from the Fall of Sunset Shimmer. The model for Canterlot is very big. It's the number of houses, the number of light sources, the number of unique houses, for example, because a lot of the towers are very iconic. A lot of the houses, for example, you get to see Donut Joe, you get to see Twilight's house. You see a lot of important buildings like the castle for the wedding, which is not the same as the one from the entrance. And it was quite a challenge for me to actually get to make everything just work together. As the camera widens, you'll be able to see better. Because the layout for Canterlot just doesn't make any sense. If you look at the front in the show with everything else, it feels like non-Euclidean, and it feels like a lot of people from different artists came up with their own different interpretation of everything. Even in the movie, it feels like the layout doesn't make sense with the show. Even if you have the camera flying, for the movie they just took a much different approach, something that felt a lot more horizontal. But in my case, I wanted something that felt very vertical, because the idea that I had was that Canterlot was built by unicorns with a vision that was way too big for their head, something that defies gravity, something that defies gravity in a way that feels like it's just to show off the Pegasus eye. So with Canterlot, the whole idea was that we would have a facade that would attract a lot of eyes, and behind it you'd actually see all the towers, the plateau. And the idea of going with that approach helped me a lot, because that way I could actually make a facade that would make a lot of sense with the wides that they show in the show. And then I wouldn't have to worry about the rest of the buildings. Doesn't make the most sense because of the way the camera is placed in the show, but for the needs of the project that I had, and at some point you just have to admit that you can't make everything line up. It's the same for my Ponyville model. A lot of it makes sense within the context of the show, but you realize then that some of the events of the show would need a lot of stretching to make it work. And here comes the title sequence. I don't often do title sequences before the end, but in this case I felt it was appropriate. The original title, the whole idea was that it was just a bar with the text. It was very inspired by the way that Final Fantasy did titles, where you'd have the iconic text followed behind by a logo that would fit. For example, 7 would have the iconic meteor. Sometimes you'd have the characters behind, and I felt in my case it felt appropriate to have the clouds. Back in the original one you had Derpy who's also showing up, but I felt it was a bit too complicated for the vision. And then I had the idea, what if we have the cloud that show up? And I was inspired by a weird recollection of how I felt about the logo for the Wind Waker from Zelda, And when I was looking for references, I realized like, oh, this is not actually doing the thinking of doing. Because originally I was thinking, oh, this starts with a cloud that forms into the logo. And it didn't. So I had to make up a model of what I felt the cloud would be looking like. And the text would just flow with the clouds. And you're going to also notice with the title, Bright Eyes in the Thunderclouds was not actually the title I had in mind when I started. For the longest time, the title was just Project Thundercloud Remake. And it just dawned on me at some point that this is kind of dull as a title. And at some point the idea went, well, I need a new title. And Bright Eyes into the Thundercloud actually came to mind. A part of it because Bright Eyes was one of the names that people are suggesting for Derpy hooves back in the days. Inspired by Bright Eyes from My Little Pony Tales. You have, and I was thinking, well, Bright Eyes also because the idea of the optimism and the contrast between optimism and Thunderclouds became Bright Eyes in the Thunderclouds when I realized that into feel a bit too wordy, and with that I just kept with that title near the end. It's also why the trailer for it doesn't actually reveal a title. Part of it is just that I didn't have the title at the time, and also that, well, since I did the reveal later, I had to update the material. So for the longest time, this sequence actually had the original title showing up. And it also kind of explains why the title is framed that way, why you have the layout Bright Eyes in big and in the Thunderclouds in small, partly because I just kept the layout of Project Thundercloud Remake, with Remake in very small. And that's one of the remnants of a different vision. A lot of it comes down to being remnants of a smaller vision. You can also see in later shots as Derpy is flying away from Canterlot, you can see the front. It was quite a challenge to actually do because the idea of rendering Canterlot in all detail on the graphics card I had back then was impossible. And thankfully around the time where I started the project, the prospects of me getting a new graphics card, just the 3060, were much better. A lot of it was actually affected by scalpers. A lot of people would just buy graphics cards to do cryptocurrency. And that was a challenge, especially for missing out, because I wanted to have very big shots of Ponyville. That's one of the things that encouraged me to do Ponyville fully Navy instead of rendering with the ray tracer, because the graphics card I had couldn't actually do ray tracing, or at least not effectively. So when it came to Bright Eyes and the Thunderclouds, the idea is that I would do a full model of Canterlot that would be hit by rain, that would require refraction, that would have lots of light sources, for example, just from the inside of the houses, the inside of the towers, that would then hit the rain was quite a challenge. So the fact that I managed to score a graphics card just helped a lot. And it's also made it quite an interesting challenge, because since Canterlot was fully 3D, I could actually fly through it instead of just having a flat image of it. And just the idea here of having a camera that flies as it falls on Derpy hooves helped a lot. The idea of having a bit of shake to make it feel like there's some turbulence, to make it feel like there's some imperfection, really helped. I can also see as Derpy Hooves is flying how it affects her hair, and in shots where she's actually just expanding her wings and they're not flapping, you can even see that the wind actually affects the feathers. Part of it came down to actually making a rig for the wing that's fully open with separate feathers. That way I can actually put some noise and some shake to actually make it feel like it's wiggling. And you can see here how it affects with the wind on each feather, how it feels a bit more physical. If I just had the fully open wing vector image and just kept it there, it wouldn't feel as much like proper wind. So just the idea of actually going with that approach made it help a lot. It felt more like flying, especially since the scale of the clouds was really hard to actually make work. And cut. And you can notice here that it goes back to the original aspect ratio. The idea of actually using the aspect ratios to denote different times was very effective, since the nonlinear narrative approach of it would be a bit challenging for some of the scenes. Sometimes you just want to make sure that the audience knows exactly when it's happening. And I felt like going with different aspect ratios would make it a lot easier. It was partly inspired by how they did it in the Grand Budapest Hotel, where different eras would be done in different aspect ratios. It was quite an interesting challenge, because doing those scenes in different aspect ratios would also mean that I couldn't just make it feel cinematic by adding black bars. I had to make it feel cinematic by the content itself.
Wait for me. You're sure you want to stay behind?
And here comes the male mares. They were actually shown in a couple of episodes, and I felt it was fitting for them to be friends with Derpy, and yes, I called her Derpy. And it felt very appropriate to show them how to interact. For example, you have Sunny Delivery, how she feels concerned for Derpy. And she's actually played by Mary Midley. It was quite interesting because I was looking for a voice actress, and it turned out that she fit perfectly with the role. Weirdly enough, the original approach I had was to ask for something that was based on her approach on Sweetie Belle, and then we worked around it. So actually showing her concern and the way that
I'll be fine.
she would look at Derpy, not looking down on her, at least not looking metaphorically down on her, just the idea that she looked concerned for Derpy.
A little tired. I'll just wait for the next train back to Ponyville.
Well, alright then. Hope the train doesn't get delayed again.
This is foreshadowing. I'm not the most subtle person, and I felt in this instance actually just having the whole idea being showcased just worked well. I needed to explain why Derpy would stay behind, and I felt a scene like this would actually work well for the needs, and the idea of delaying the train worked really well. And while I'm talking about the train, let's talk really quickly about the layout of Canterlot. You have the facade, the castle that's under the upper level for the royalty and the people close to royalty. You have the second level that's mostly for the, I say unicorn elite, but mostly just people studying magic or all the artifacts around magic that go on the second level. So you have the library, you have Celestia School for the gifted unicorns, you have a couple of towers around, and on the lower level with all the houses, you have the train station, and you have the post office. I was looking back at how they did the layout back in the Canterlot wedding, and it wasn't fully clear how they approached it. And it just dawned on me at some point that what if the train actually passes through the mountain, because they came up with Canterlot before the idea of trains. So they had to carve out of the tunnel of out of the Canterlot mountain for the train to go to, all to get to the train station. And that way you'd have Twilight running from the train station to the main tower. It's a bit of a long distance to cover to get there, but I felt this worked well with the needs. And then you also have the post office, not the post office main office, mostly just the one that just does the triage and that has a dispatch for the mail ponies. The whole idea was that it was right next to the train station, so that whenever they would need to ship things by train, this would be right next to it. They could actually put the last train with all the mail behind the passenger train, and it just felt right. So this is a bit why the layout is set like that. Different interpretations definitely go with their own approach and how they're going to go with the train station. I felt mine was appropriate for the needs of the project, and I felt it just worked well. It's one of those things you do whenever you do environment art. You have to think of the logistics of how people will live around it, and it felt for me like this would be a way for people to live in Canterlot. And then you have the reveal. You have Derpy who's looking, and then she turns, and then you realize why she's concerned. And then you cut to her childhood flashbacks in 4x3. Part of it is that, in my case, since I grew up in the 90s, the early 2000s, an era with lots of TV shows, lots of home movies, lots of photos just in 4x3. It felt appropriate for me to showcase Derpy Hoof's childhood at that aspect ratio. It just felt appropriate to go with that, and I was thinking also, can I make 4x3 cinematic? And turns out you can. It's definitely more challenging because the cinematic norm tends to have very, very wide frames, usually battlefields, lots of action scenes that go very, very horizontally. So going with something that's more vertical would be quite a challenge, and I think it worked well for that. Part of it also really helped because since it was a scene between two characters, 4x3 is great for conversations with just faces. So I could just have those close-ups of those faces, and then I could actually use the verticality to actually show those clouds that are on top.
Don't do this, sis! You'll get seriously injured!
And then you have raindrops played by Magpie. This will be important later. You'll also notice...
I have to do my best. It's the only way. There has to be a better way. I'm sure then. We tried. That won't work. What?
You'll notice, since the nonlinear narrative approach for Brightest and Thunderclouds, the whole idea of going with that nonlinear narrative approach, part of it came down to the idea that trauma is not something that we do linearly. We don't think of the events that shaped our lives just going from the start to finish, and people would just look back at something from their childhood, then the last day, back and forth. It was a bit tricky because I was thinking, like, what is the best approach to show why things are the way they are? And I went with a ping-pong approach. So you have Derpy, who starts, she asks, like, why did I stay behind? Shows why she stayed behind was the clouds. She got scared of it. It goes back to when she's a child with those same clouds. And then it goes to the Wonderbolts Academy, just following a chain of events that go to explain why she's like this now.
I'm afraid you won't be able to qualify for the Wonderbolts Academy due to your condition.
And then we have Wind Rider, played by Tasteless Joke.
But why? I thought you said it was all about having great wings and doing our best.
I do not make the rules.
This scene was a bit inspired by something that happened to me back when I was in 3rd grade of high school. Basically, I had to argue and two teachers, basically trying to fight to be let into higher grade mathematics classes. I was not the best student, but I was trying to explain to them that, in my opinion, they should look at me for the average grade I had for the whole class, and not just the one semester I had where I was lower. And they just didn't want to listen to me, and they just instead wanted to put me at the lowest of the lowest, which was pretty tricky because I was risking getting kicked out of school because of the weird way that they did the math classes. And I was trying to make them understand that they shouldn't judge me just because of that last semester, because, you know, sometimes you have other events that are going on, and they wouldn't listen to me. So it was a bit inspired by that, just the idea of being told by adults that, you know, that they're just dismissing everything and they're trying to push me on something. They're trying to push me away from what I'm trying to do. In that way, it was, I want to show how rough it was. It was also inspired by some other events that I don't want to discuss right now, but, you know, being on the spectrum, I had to deal with lots of things with school that, in retrospect, feel very unfair. Just it feels like the school system just failed me in a lot of ways, and I feel like a lot of people feel the same way. So just showing how Derpy would feel with the Wonderbolts Academy, the way they would just look at her and say, like, this is not good enough, felt very appropriate.
Those flies are the best of Equestria, so they have to be strict.
And just the idea, a lot of it just came down to the idea of how whenever you look at people on the spectrum, they would assume that, you know, they would assume that people on the spectrum are just geniuses, or at least the ones that succeed have to be geniuses. And I was very worried about that trope, and I was thinking, like, what if Derpy is put to that burden where she's in a situation where she has to be better than perfect, or else people would just find that she's accepted of pity. The idea that, you know, we put very, very high standards on people in that way, which is pretty ironic in a way. Like, you have, you know, you can't just be just good and that's it, because people would look at it in that kind of bad way. So just the idea of having Derpy being faced with that just felt very important for me. And that's why I asked Tasteless to go with the direction when he was playing Wind Rider. And it's very important for the next line.
There has to be a way to let me in. I'll work extra hard.
If the first Wonderbolt was for business, isn't record shattering? Ponies will think you got in out of pity. Oh, I don't know. Maybe you'll change their minds if you manage to ride a thunderstorm.
The direction I gave Tasteless at that point was, think of it like you're telling a child to go play in the traffic. He felt a bit weird about that line at first, but I think this was the best way to describe how he felt about this whole situation. And you're also going to notice a pattern that's going to be recurring. A lot of characters that influence Derpy's lives. For example, with Wind Rider, he has his sunglasses, and a lot of the characters that influence our life have some kind of glasses. So they're not perfect in a way, they don't have perfect vision. In this case, he's mostly just wearing the sunglasses to be a jerk, I think. It's not, as far as I know, it's not those regular glasses that happen to be shaded for using outside. I think you just had that attitude. So you see about how Wind Rider is just affecting Derpy by just pushing her in a wrong way like this. And then you see the sequence where you have Derpy who's hit. And the whole shot was done in slow-mo. It was very violent. I wanted to show the pain, and I felt like going to that kind of slow-mo is very effective. And it was very challenging because I didn't want it to feel overly dramatic, like I was trying to do a parody of a Snyder shot. The whole idea was that it was supposed to hit to show how violent it felt and how painful it felt. In earlier versions of that scene, the whole shot is just cut, it's just shown from far away. And when I realized the impact of hitting a child like that, it felt more appropriate. And you have the shot that is repeating a shot that I had in the original version of Project Thundercloud. The idea of Derpy being struck by lightning and staring at the bubbles was very important for the vision. If you look back at the original one, it barely looks like she's staring at it. And part of it was that it was just shot from the side. So I ended up just changing the camera angle, actually looking in her eyes where she's having that moment. Felt a lot more effective, and the fact that I could then look and use that as a transition point was perfect, because then you realize why it hits, why it feels scary for her.
Come on, snap out of it! Celestia needs us!
And then you cut to a transition shot, and I say transition shot because this shot was not part of the beginning of Harmony. I actually had a big challenge because the original model that I had for the Alicorn Kingdom was done in Maya, and I couldn't actually render it in Maya. So I had to find a way to salvage one of the models I had to remake the whole scene, make it work, and to add the clouds and to add the dramatic lighting. And then you go back to other scenes that I could actually re-render. And I say re-render because it's not just a clip that I had from the beginning of Harmony. I had to change the aspect ratio, I had to fix some of the lighting, The clouds, for example, are handled much differently to get that nice rim light. The depth of field is done differently. And just the fact that I had the original source files for those scenes was very, very important. This is your reminder to make backups. Lots of backups. Not just a final render of the project. Keep the source files too. You'll never know when you need to reuse something old. This flashback shot here, I couldn't just reuse the render. I needed to go back and fix it. Those stairs, same place, same model, but expanded. Those houses, they might have terrible topology, but you'll only see them from far away anyway. These 3D models of the elements of harmony, this run cycle of Twilight and Spike, me showing the behind the scenes of a shot at a convention while we try to get the sound working. Keep everything. Hard drives are cheap, losing time is expensive. And then you cut back to Celestia as she's staring back and she's feeling her worries. And it really helped in this scene that the way that the stained glass for the sun was the one that would point in the right direction, so you could actually match the lighting. I was very happy that the coincidence happened. And then you see Raven Inkwell,
Just got word from the Canterlot Weather Patrol.
played by Shadow, who's also playing Twilight Sparkle. It was pretty funny during the production. One of the things she asked me was, do you want a British accent or an American accent? And I was a bit worried because I was thinking, like, I don't want her to do a fake British accent. It would feel a bit more stereotypical. And I was thinking, like, let's go with an American one. As I was telling her, like, well, you cannot be American and fancy, right? And that's why we went with the direction for her. The whole idea with Raven Inkwell is that she's very close to Celestia with her duties as her secretary, and she gets to know a lot more than common folks, so she has a good idea of the fear she has. So in that scene, just the idea that she's looking at Celestia as she feels like she knows that something feels wrong, it was very important.
This weather wasn't part of their schedule.
And a nice little detail, the way that she adjusts her glasses, because I mentioned earlier, the glasses as a pattern was very, very important. And it was very important in a way where I wanted the glasses to actually have refraction. In a lot of cartoons, what they would do whenever a character has glasses is that they would have the glasses that just become the eye. And I hate that trope in a way, mostly just because it feels lazy. It makes sense in a lot of cartoons because you want clarity where you want to see the eyes perfectly. And on a fast-paced animation production, the idea that you'd have to make the eyes layered behind would just make the production a nightmare. But I felt it was very important for this production to actually have proper refraction. And the way that they did refraction was interesting because it's fully 2D. You have actually a mask behind the glasses, and everything that's behind the mask is actually shifted. Since it's all done in Toon Boom, I didn't have to worry about the way that it would cut through it. So just the idea of having that refraction added would actually make it feel a lot more like glasses. It's not the first project where I used that technique. In the beginning of Harmony, the mayor caretaker actually has glasses as well, and they actually employ the same technique. And just the fact that I can do that helps a lot. And I can even art direct the refraction to actually have the eyes line up in the place I want in the frame is very important, because sometimes you might look at something that refracts at this very specific angle and you lose everything. A lot of 3D productions, you'd have characters with glasses and the glasses don't even refract. They feel like just empty frames. Part of it is that since the refraction is done within the rendering, you don't see it within the render, within the real-time render. So just the idea of being able to actually see that refraction in the viewport for me was very, very helpful. The idea of being able to change it was very helpful. And just the idea where she adjusts it also gives a lot of character for her. So
We might be under attack.
We have to contact Twilight and her friends right now.
and then you see the mechanism of the top tower, and it's pretty funny because the whole idea of having a mechanism to rotate the top tower for it to face away from Canterlot or into Canterlot was simply a way to fix a problem I had, because in the Fall of Sunset Shimmer the tower actually faces towards Canterlot in some shots but not all. And I was thinking at some point, what if it's an observation tower that rotates in case of an emergency? What if Canterlot gets attacked and you need to turn the tower to actually see better, because that one's located at the very top. So the idea of actually having a fully canized rotating top tower worked really well. And I was really worried about the rhythm, but I think it works really well for the intent of the scene. And then you can see here where you see Celestia fail to send a letter. A lot of people were wondering at first, like, why didn't Celestia ask Spike for that? In the original Project Thundercloud, the whole idea is that she sent a letter through Derpy because her magic was failing, because she was getting weaker and weaker. But in this one, I just realized, like, she's not getting weaker just like that. Something has to affect it, and the magical storm made a lot of sense for her to actually need help, because she couldn't send those letters. And just pretty helpful too, because it could actually showcase the imminent danger. She feels very trapped. She feels there's
This isn't working.
And you can also see a nice little detail. The glasses on Raven actually fog up because of the humidity. And I didn't think of it at first. I was actually doing it during the compositing phase, where I realized, like, it makes the most sense. And it's a nice little detail that just adds to it.
If I may offer a suggestion.
And this is the moment where she realizes, like, well, the Royal Mail has... They used to be part of the Equestrian Army, just the same way as the Wonderbolts. So she's thinking, like, well, we could ask them. And it goes back to the moment where she's looking back and we realize, like, she's there because she's the last one who stayed behind. She stayed behind because of the weather, but she has to fly because she's the only one who is capable, and despite the fact that it's her fear. And it was quite interesting because it's not explained within the animation, but the one reason why they did go with Royal Guards to deliver is the fact that they're not trained on speed, they're trained on strength. And the idea of having a Royal Guard fly through that storm was a bit more alarming. So the idea of just asking for her was a lot more effective in the way that Celestia would look at it. Maybe it's not the best solution, but for Celestia at the time it made the most sense. And sometimes it's not the solution that makes the most sense that happens. It's just a solution that you come up with. And the solution that she came up with was, let's go with Derpy hooves.
Miss Muffins, the princess requires your service.
And let's mention it right now, because I forgot to mention it earlier. She's called Muffins in the animation. Part of it is the fact that it needs to connect back to the show, and the show decided she's named Muffins. Some people were concerned about this decision, but in my case, the reasoning was that it didn't make the most sense for people to call her Derpy hooves because it feels pejorative. The idea of being a nickname, mean nickname from other ponies made a lot of sense, but her calling herself Derpy hooves was weird, and it made a lot of sense for me to just go with that name. So the idea of having Derpy being named Muffins just worked.
The princess needs me. Equestria needs me. Binky needs me. I can't. I'm a failure.
So, if you are at TrotCon 2024, this scene was actually missing. Part of it was that it was a late edition. Originally, within the original screenplay, the idea was that Derpy would be stuck in just that cliffside for a while, just very, very scared about going further because she got scared by that weather. And it felt like it needed a moment where she stops because she's in a situation where she's a bit more in comfort, where she thinks that if she stops, she won't have to face her fears anymore. And it just made sense for her, for the story, to have that moment where she stops and she just thinks about herself. It was very, very important because I could then use that moment for her to realize like what's at stake, and what's at stake is her family. And then you see the weird dynamic for her family because if you look back at the original Project Thundercloud, Derpy's mom is pretty much just Derpy, but with a white coat as an earth pony, and she has flowers as a cutie mark. Until I realized that you had Millie in one of the episodes where she's actually covering Dinky's ears, and a lot of people were thinking, well, what if she's her mom? And then I realized later, like, no, what if she's her grandma? And the whole idea is that she's actually Derpy's mom, and that Derpy is seen as Dinky's mother because she's not her biological mom. She's pretty much just someone who takes care of her, and she looks at her like a mother. And then you have a Metastar who's slightly younger than Derpy, but she's clearly not capable of taking care of a child. So you have Millie who's there to help, and you have Derpy who feels a lot of... She feels a connection with Dinky, and she feels like she wants to care for her. So the idea of a family connection with Dinky was very important to show that even if Derpy's life is weird, it still means something. And you have a moment where you have Millie just ask as she's staring.
How can two precious ponies be left in such conditions? Muffin, stop standing there and go bring up.
And the whole idea with that scene, that moment where she's saying, like, do something, connects back. She's just being like, don't stand there or do nothing. You gotta help. You gotta do something. And then she realized, like, I can't stop. I can't freeze in that situation. I gotta do something. And that's a moment where she thinks back. And it connects back to the later shot where she's asking herself,
That's how I got my cutie.
my life makes no sense. And you can see Cheerly in this scene as a filly. It's partly me fixing a mistake I made in the original Project Thundercloud. Originally I was taking probably older than the main six because she's a lot more grounded. She doesn't go into these weird shenanigans. She does adult things. She thinks like an adult. So to me it made a lot of sense for her to be older. And also taking like, teachers teach a lot more than just one generation. Until someone pointed out, oh no, in the Cutie Mark Chronicles, you can actually see her as a filly. And then when I realized that I was wrong, I had to fix it. And you actually see Playwright, who's implied to be their teachers, because she's the teacher in Rarity's story. And to me, it just made sense. Like, what if she's just a teacher for the scene? And then you have, it's quite interesting, the bully in the original project was just a recolored Diamond Tiara. And when I realized the colors actually matched with an Equestria Girls character, decided like, what if it's just her as a filly? What if she just happened to be a bully that just moved out of town later? And it just worked well for that.
So, Bubbles means you're good at what?
Well, I say bully, she's not intending to hurt Derpy, but she's pointing out the obvious and the hurtful, that
I'm not...
the whole idea of having a Cutie Mark and not understanding it is weird.
sure yet. I think I float in the air? Gently? Like bubbles?
And yes, I've heard a lot of interpretations with Derpy's Cutie Mark. The interpretation I had in the original Project Thunderclouds was that it's a lucky number, but it's also something that's fragile. So she's in a weird position where her clumsiness connects with her character, but it's also weird to explain it that way. Some people, and I think the funniest headcanon I've seen is the idea that since she's clumsy, she breaks things, so she becomes the inventor of bubble wrap. And I find it hilarious. It's very absurd, but I love it.
You got your cutie mark, and you're still not sure what you're good at?
And then you connect back to those scenes. You have the moment where you have Millie who's really scared because she ended up injuring herself. And you have, of course, muffins, because it made the most sense. It was in the original scene as well, so I went with it. I don't tend to joke too much in those scenes because, you have to keep the tone, and putting a joke in there doesn't make sense. But I also named the set Horspital, so I have a weird sense of humor sometimes. And of course you have that one moment where you see Derpy going lower and lower in scores. The idea was that once she realized that the Wonderbolts didn't want her, she started losing hope, and she would start just going worse and worse. And a funny outcome too is that when I realized that the one parent that she still has is her mom, who's a nerd pony, and putting her in near a balloon so she could actually see it, it made sense, because that way you can actually see the distance she has, not only physical, but the fact that she's a nerd pony, so she can't even help by telling her, don't worry about things, I know a bit what it's like to fly. She doesn't know what it is. The headcanon I had, because the original Project Thundercloud implies that one of her parents was a Wonderbolts member, but the whole idea is that Millie ended up marrying a Wonderbolts, and she's just a nerd pony, but they bond over other things, and eventually they ended up getting two Pegasi daughters. But it's not something very explored, just the idea that she's very attached to Wonderbolts, partly because she wants to look up to someone else, and the idea that she's rejected really hurts. And then of course you have the moment from Over a Barrel, the idea that she looks back at herself making failures because she realizes that she got lots of people angry because sometimes she makes mistakes. And then you have a moment with Spitfire, and then you feel like the contrast, like she's just there to deliver uniforms, but she feels like a failure because what she's doing is pretty much a small job. She's forced to face what she feels is a failure. And as she feels like she's a failure and nothing makes sense in her life, she's sinking. So this transition shot, weirdly enough, this is inspired by The Last Jedi's trailer. For some reason they didn't put it in the final movie, but you had a scene where it feels like you're looking at stars, and the exposure gradually goes up and up and up, and you realize that you're just looking at grains of sand on top of rocks. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So in this case, with the exposure going down on something that looks like clouds, and you feel like, oh, those are stormy clouds, until it goes gradually up, and you realize that no, those are just regular clouds on a cloudy but pretty good day. Just helps to change the contrast in this. And then you have the moment where you have Derpy just realizing that, oh, she might be interested in something that has to do with the male. She could become a male mare. And in a little scene, you just have Derpy who just looks up, like, oh, and that's it. And then you cut back, in this case, ended up extrapolating with that idea, the idea that, oh, she got the letter, because she's gonna deliver it, right? Originally, the scene I had in my head was just a scene where she goes to deliver it to the person, and she realized, oh, I could do that, as a job. And a cool thing you have with working with voice actors, in my case, I much prefer working with voice actors in a call. Like, I can actually go back and forth with directions for lines. So for that line, one of the things I asked Brittany is, can you hold something in your mouth to make it sound like you have a letter in your mouth? And just the fact that we could have that just helped the scene a lot. It feels like she's struggling to talk just because she has a letter in her mouth. It worked real well. And then you have the character of Love Letter, who, as I said earlier, also has glasses.
Whoa. You're really fast. Are you part of the Wonderbolts?
And she's played by the last narrator. I was actually looking at, as an inspiration, I was looking back at her bloopers, because she does lots of audio dramas, and as you record lots of audio dramas, this means a lot of bloopers. And I realized, like, oh, she has a voice for the character I was thinking in my head. And since I was also getting Magpie for roles, it feels a bit rude to just ask one but not the other since they're married. So it's been a running gag that whenever I cast one, I cast the other one as well for a different role. It turns out that they were just perfect. It just lined up perfectly. So for the vision I had for Love Letter is that, well, I say Love Letter, the name I had for her back then was just Old Mailmare. And the whole idea is that she's just looking for someone to replace her because she's going to be retiring at some point. She wants to just focus on her hobbies. So the idea of seeing, someone from a new generation to look forward to was just perfect for her. And it was a bit direction for Love Letter. Just the idea that she's very excited to bring new people around.
Oh, I wish I could, but they won't have me because of my condition.
Well.
And yes, the text is actually readable. I had to cheat a bit to make it slightly less readable because within the style of the show, they don't actually go with text very often. If you look back at season 1 and 2, they might have text on some boards, and that's it. Since it's done for international markets, they will often try to avoid text because in lots of cases they would need to either translate it, which might be tricky, or they would need to have voiceover, which would be weird. They try to avoid text, but in the case of the flyer, I was thinking, like, this makes the most sense for her to have a flyer that talks about something. And since the project I have a lot more detail visually in those things, it just felt weird to have just a featureless flyer that she's looking at. And you can see also that it's implying that it's actually expanding up and down, up with the Crystal Empire and down with I said the Badlands, but the ones from the My Little Pony the movie. So it gives you a good idea of the time of the scene. You can also see the other hubs: Vancouver, Las Pegasus, Manhattan, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and of course Baltimore because I love that pun.
I think the Royal Mail has any physical requirements. Maybe you could try and apply.
And it's also blurry because of trying to put focus on the pony. It looks a bit like Derpy. It's very, very heavy foreshadowing. But you had on one side talking about two teams, for example. You had the blue team for regular mail and the brown team for more express mail. And the whole idea was that it just made sense because when in the show you see some ponies with the blue uniforms and some with the brown one. And I was thinking, like, what if we explore that? And of course, when in the flyer you can see all details. For example, benefits like Solar Life, their life insurance, Play on Sun Life. One thing I was also planning to do was to have her fly over Baltimore. I ended up doing a model of Baltimore on the Baltimore Convention Center. Ended up not using that model after all, but I was originally envisioning it because I was thinking, like, we need to fly in different places, and it was pretty interesting to see the different locations. I ended up going with Canterlot because it's something that felt very relatable to people. So
I have to go now. I hope you consider it. It may not be saving Equestria, but those folks think getting their mail late is the end of the world anyways.
very, very unsubtle foreshadowing. I think part of it was I wanted to showcase the idea that people look at services like the mail like, it's not a big deal, but the moment they have something that's late that they're waiting for, it feels like the end of the world. It's those small things that feel very important to people. And it made the most sense for me within that moment to have her explain, like, this is important. This might not feel like much for people, but in this case she didn't realize how important those words were, because you have the moment where you realize all the other ponies, what they feel about it. You have Luna, who's looking from the Crystal Empire because she was in a visit at the time. She's looking and she's thinking, like, what is going on as the clouds are getting bigger and bigger, like they're starting to cover all of Equestria. You have all it impacts her family. You see Dinky, you see Amethyst Star, you see Dr. Hooves that are staring as the weather is getting worse and worse. And then you have the moment where you actually see what's going on with Celestia. The one shot here where you see the whole idea was that it was inspired by the one moment where the ceiling of my apartment decided to collapse because of a leak. The sight of seeing like a leak is terrifying. So a lot of it is very personal because a lot of it just comes down to being driven by things I know personally. So the idea of that felt very important as a visual. I'm pretty sure it happened to a lot of other people to see a leaking ceiling and feeling like your life is over. And in a specific case, when you see that, and then you have, for example, with this shot where you have Vinyl Octavia, which is a bit of reference to the original opening shot of Project Thundercloud, where they're there just staring in confusion. It just felt interesting to just see the scale as you see more common ponies react to this. And then you see this shot from their point of view. It was added later on in the production where I was realizing that I was doing just a camera render to have a sphere render for the reflections for one of the models. And as I was doing that, I noticed that from that angle the tower was imposing and the light was perfect. So it just inspired that one shot where you see from their point of view that glowing light, that intense magic.
Why did Celestia need me?
And you see just the impact. That's actually a criticism I heard a lot from people thinking, like, what is Celestia doing right now? Like, she's just sending her problem to Twilight and that's it. And I felt it was very important to show that Celestia is not just standing there just doing nothing. She's very concerned for Canterlot, so she's doing her best to try to protect it from dangers. So just showing the pain of just keeping it going was very important. It's a bit inspired by the events of Crystal Empire, just showing Cadence as she's trying to protect the Crystal Empire. Just the drain it has, trying to do that kind of magic. And then you cut back to that one moment. A part that I technically foreshadowed in Thundercloud Mental Ray Test, which was actually just a homework I did where I was asked, like, do God rays underwater? And I was thinking, like, okay, I could do that. Lots of people are going to do that. They're going to do another water scene where you have some nice caustics that are coming down. And that's it. And then I realized, like, what if I do a remake of that one shot from Project Thundercloud, but good? One of those moments you actually have voiceover where you have someone just shouting, like, "Sister, what are you doing?" It's a headcanon I have had for a long time, the idea that Derpy's sister is Raindrops. Partly because the bubbles and the water drops, Cutie marks just felt like they lined up. But also because I felt like having a sister character for her to have a contrast would be interesting. So having Raindrops at that moment try to save her, and at that moment also getting her cutie mark, I felt like it was very, very interesting as an approach. Like, this is a moment not just for Derpy. This is a moment where you show that other ponies care about her, and that caring about other people impacts their lives as well. And then it cut back to that one moment where she's just standing on a cloud, thinking like, what am I doing with my life? And yes, she says 10 years ago. I was originally planning on releasing the project 10 years after Project Thundercloud, because it's been, 10 years of learning, and it just unfortunately didn't happen, but it still made a lot of sense for her, because I was thinking like, this is something that was very important to her as a child. And I was thinking like 10 years sounds like a good moment in time. So what if she was, around 8 or 10 at a moment where it happened, and now she's just an adult. It's been a long time and still feels like yesterday.
Celestia asked me to deliver this letter because...
And that's the moment that she has a realization where the whole idea was, what if there's a break within the clouds just big enough for the light from the sun to actually come out. That moment where you have the celestial figure that looks back at Derpy telling her, I believe in you. And there's that little addition that was not planned ahead. The whole idea that she's looking back at Celestia, because we didn't see her reaction. And there's a moment where she smiles and she realizes like, I believe in you. And she's been blocking that in her head because she's so full of self-doubt that she can't accept the idea that Celestia would believe in her. And the moment where she realizes it just feels very impactful for her.
Because she believes in me!
And then you have the moment where she's actually flying. A good showcase of the cloud system I built with that. You can even actually see here. It's my favorite kind of donut, the honey cruller. I ended up as a little joke just putting a model of the honey cruller as a cloud. And just funny looking back at that, thinking it's everywhere. The whole cloud system, the whole idea was that I didn't want clouds that just felt like puffs of smoke. I wanted something that felt a bit more artistic, because Missing Out had just a volumetric system that was hacked to generate clouds. I was thinking like, this is not good enough for the needs of this project, because it has lots of weather, lots of art directed weather. And by art directed, what I mean is that all the parameters that come to creating the image come from the artist, because the cloud models are pretty much just noise that with lots of contrast, and noise is mostly just random. So those clouds I just sculpted myself to look like clouds, and then I scattered to look like those shapes, and it feels a lot like mashed potatoes. And it was a bit the direction I wanted. It wanted those clouds to feel tangible. And just modeling those clouds just helped a lot to get a vision, especially since in the show, in the direction of the show, some of those clouds have nice little twirls, and I felt like those twirls are iconic. So just having those clouds with twirls just work great. And of course, since I can hard direct everything, I can put the lightning at the right place, and it just lights everything up perfectly. And then you cut to the reveal of Ponyville, and the inspiration I had was something that a lot of people feel the first few times they're flying. Just staring the city, just popping out of the clouds, you see all those lights, and it feels a sense of relief because you're finally landing. That was the inspiration, the way that the clouds would break, just intentionally, just to make it feel like she's finally landing. That part was not my idea. It came from Sapphire Sistrine. He did all the sound mix, a lot of engineering just to get the sound right. If you look back at the original Project Thundercloud, the sound mix was terrible, partly because I did it. And one of the things I had to learn is that sometimes just delegating to other people who know what they're doing is much more effective. So he did the sound mix of the project, and then he realized like, oh, what if we have happy horse noises when she's doing the rearing? And it felt perfect. And that's one of those things I'm very grateful of, working with people with lots of great ideas. And I will absolutely say this is his idea. I do not want to take credit for suggestions. This is just perfect. And you can also see in that shot, there's a cloud that's perfectly aligned just to switch between two rigs, because turns out that the rig I had, one in the angles and the other one, when she's flying, it turns out that I couldn't just transition between the two well. Basically just switching between the two with a cloud would work well. And you can also see a weird side effect, the denoising I used, because this is all ray traced, but ray tracing generates a lot of noise if you don't have enough samples, and with the budget I couldn't just render with a render farm that you could actually get enough samples. Turns out that one of the artifacts it gives is weird wiggling, and that weird wiggling here turns out to be perfect to make it look like it's raining. It's one of the rare times where one of those bugs just feel right for direction, and I am very grateful of that.
Letter from the princess.
And then you have a moment where she finally delivers the letter, and the idea that Twilight is looking, originally in Earth 1 the idea was that she was just looking outside because things felt a bit weird. The night was lasting a bit longer than expected. So I felt like, what if she's looking in the sky to see if something's going on while she's waiting for answers? And it felt like going with that same decision, with her just staring outside, trying to understand why those clouds that were not expected are there, felt effective. So that's why the whole scene happens outside. Also, it just breaks the flow if you have a scene where she arrives, gets inside, and then delivers the letter inside. Like, it doesn't feel as intense and as effective.
What's going on? Got it. Let's go.
Something I did not cover before, the way that the weather was affecting the water, was quite a challenge. So all the waves you can see here are actually generated by curving geometry and actually having it collide, and then the foam was animated on top. So it was not simulated. It feels more dramatic that way because I could actually decide exactly where they are and what kind of intensity they have. It was inspired by someone actually doing something like that, just fully animated, instead of actually simulating it. I was trying to do a proper water simulation, but the computational cost of doing those kinds of water simulations is horrible. So just the idea of just doing it myself with some meshes that are bent to form those shapes just work really well. And then you have the moment of the rainbow. It's very, very, very dramatic. It's supposed to hit like lightning, partly because of the connection with how she was struck around that place. Because she's looking back at a moment in time. Because she's looking back at herself, how she was struck around, and how she's grown since, but she feels like didn't feel impactful. So just the idea that she has, she just stares and she sees that other people fix the problem, not her, it feels empty for her. And a little detail, you have Candyman, and I felt like it was important to put Candyman in that role, because I don't know if it was intentional or it's just a mistake, but in the early seasons she was an adult with no cutie mark. So the idea of a character who realized her full potential very late in life was very relatable with the whole story. So just the idea of having her just look back and have some connections felt right. As you have the camera just panning down and you look at Derpy feeling something similar as she's just going back home. And the location of the home is interesting because I wrote myself into a corner with missing out. The house, the location was set because the camera was panning up and you could see Derpy and Dinky in the house. So at that point I realized like, oh, that's official. That's where they live, right? And it turned out that it was a really nice location for the whole thing to happen. It's not established in Slice of Life where they live. It's only established that Dr. Hooves has a little laboratory, but I felt like it made sense for her to have, just a regular house. So when she's just going back. And you're also going to notice when things go back to normal that the aspect ratio changes again. In this case it was just sliding back bars, but the fact that the aspect ratio would go back to something like the one of the show just worked well for the scene. It felt like a relief as well because it felt like pressure was taken out of her. It felt less claustrophobic. It felt like the sky was finally back to normal. And then you see Dinky.
Mommy? Mommy! You're back! Where were you? I had nightmares about it.
This is not a coincidence. This is actually Nicole Goodnight, who played Dinky in Dinky's Destiny. And
We were so worried about you. Did the train get canceled again?
Princess Celestia asked me to bring an important letter to Twilight.
Twilight Sparkle?
And that's right. This is actually the voices of Amethyst Star and Dr. Hooves from Project Thundercloud 2. Ariana Nicole George and Cougar McDowell.
You helped her save the day?
And the funny thing is that this was something I was hoping to do, but at some point I was thinking like, oh, it's been a decade, would they be interested in that? Because for a long time I just lost connection because things in life happened. So for the longest time I was really worried about them. I was thinking like, I hope nothing bad happened. No, it turns out that everything has been really going well. Nicole Goodnight has been doing roles for video games. She was a princess in Slay the Princess. She's been doing the narration for Summer Games Done Quick. You got Ariana, who's doing plays, a lot like actual proper stage plays. This is incredible. Cougar McDowell has been very, very successful with YouTube. So, as it turns out, things went great for them. They've been doing some incredible successful work, and I'm very proud of them. It feels strange to think that I asked them to be part of a small project all those years ago. And looking back, thinking like, I also turned out to work in the animation industry. So, looking back at that and thinking like, the idea that they wanted to come back to the project was very, very touching for me. It felt nice to see that they were interested. This scene was quite interesting because the original script was completely different. The idea was that she would arrive home and Dinky would already know what happened, and then she would turn her head and realize that Celestia was there the whole time and told them what happened. But then I realized, like, why would Celestia be able to go back home before her? And I was thinking, like, this doesn't work well. And the idea then became,
No, Twilight saved the day. I'm just a mail mare.
what if she told them, like, oh, I told Twilight about this, and, she's the one who saved the day. And then they make the connection, like, oh, no.
You faced this crazy weather to come help Twilight. That's an adventure on its own.
You helped her. You were part of the story. You were one of the heroes. And it felt a lot more impactful that way. This is why that scene was recorded one of the last parts. I wanted to make sure that everything would be done well, because I didn't want to give a cameo to people that would be just wasteful. And the idea of having that scene where she realizes that all of that was meaning something was perfect.
I'm not a hero.
You're our hero. No pony can take that away from you.
All my friends won't believe it.
And you will see here in the back a piece of art that was actually done for the original Project Thundercloud 2 from Seminet or Semina. I've actually never known how he's pronouncing it. I've known him since the early days of Newgrounds. He was very excited for a project at the time, and I asked him, like, do you want to do some art for the project? And it ended up being a little cameo at the end. And
You'll have to tell me all about
it was a
it.
nice little detail.
I'm sure.
It's very blurry, but you can see the family. You have Derpy, Raindrops, Millie, who I fully named Millie Hooves for some reason. And then you have the father. The whole idea was that he was a Wonderbolt. And just to imply that the family connection is still very important here.
Or she's exhausted. Why not let her tell us later, okay?
Right. Let's let her nap first.
I will bake her muffins for when she wakes up.
No, I want to tell you now.
So, it was the end of my shift at the Royal Mail, and it was raining, so
And yes, she says, it's hard to hear because the music is very loud, but she says that the train derailed, and you'll be able to see it if you look back at the opening sequence, where you actually see the train very briefly on the side. This was originally supposed to be part of a much bigger sequence, where you have Derpy who's trying to fly on the side of the mountain, and then she realizes that she can't do that because a boulder hit the train track, and the train ended up going on the side. And the train conductor basically says, like, don't fly here, it's dangerous. And the whole idea was that she realizes, like, you know, the whole weather caused the whole landslide, so flying very close to the mountain is very dangerous at that time. But that part ended up being cut because it didn't flow with everything else. But the fact that the train derailed is still a detail that you can see in the opening as you see Derpy flying away from Canterlot. And then you can look at Celestia as she's looking at Canterlot finally safe. And you can see Raven just walk as she stares at what she did. A nice sense of accomplishment. And then you see the connection. And some people, when they looked at Tempest, the first reaction was, oh, am I going to do a sequel that connects with Tempest? But in this case, no, it's actually connecting back with the movie, because in the movie you can see Derpy just running to go save Twilight. And I felt like this connection was very important to see how her character developed since. And it was also interesting because in this case it implies that the Storm King had something to do with those clouds. And since the elements of harmony is still a thing that they can't control, this explains why he did his attack much later, when he knew that the elements would be ineffective. So the connection with Tempest was a lot more regarding that. And then you have the theme that goes back with Blue Maroni, who did an incredible job in my opinion. And yes, I did the full animation for a project, which is why it takes me a long time to make those animations. Part of it is that, well, I can't just send work to be done by other people because this is a very complex production. Part of it is also that, you know, this is very personal project, so it makes the most sense for me to do those things myself. So having that as a project also thankfully means that I have lots of control over the final direction. So there's a lot of details that I was actually able to control myself. And one of those things is that the ending sequence is fully animated.
Oh, hey, Derpy.
And yes, a nice little detail. Brittany actually playing Rainbow Dash as well. This was not something I was planning at first. The idea was just a plain credit sequence, just text on black. Until I realized, like, oh, we need to have Derpy just connect to her scene back with Over a Barrel. So having that scene where she talks with Rainbow Dash and Rainbow Dash apologizes worked well. This was not the original idea for the scene. The idea was that it would be a conversation between Spitfire and Derpy. until I realized Brittany could do Rainbow Dash. Then I realized like I can actually have that connection where she talks about the Wonderbolts and the male mares having a connection, something that connected them better.
Sorry, I mean muffins. Heard from Twilight you helped us out with that magic storm. That's awesome. Listen, I'm sorry about that one time. You didn't mean to cause trouble, and I screamed at you. Will you forgive me?
Of course, Rainbow.
You know, I realized a thing. The Wonderbolt story.
And yeah, I want to mention really quickly, I had some additional art from other artists. You have Typhoon, who did the vector art of the stained glasses from Canterlot all those years ago that they still need. Did an incredible job. You have Tired Brony, who did the usual flash rigs for mares that actually taught me a lot about how to rig those ponies. You got Lucas, who did a few 3D models that helped me with, for example, the Sweet Apple Acres, some barrels, some trolleys, some small things that really helped me to make those Ponyville models. And you have Abesh, who did a map of Ponyville that was as lore as accurate as possible. That helped me a lot to make that 3D model in a way that just made the most sense. Nightshade, who did some models for the beginning of Harmony of towers for the Alicorn Kingdom. Saminat, who did the one drawing. So I want to make sure to properly credit those artists because they did an amazing job, and I couldn't be where I am right now without them.
Thunderbolt story from the EUP guard, just like the Equestrian Grove.
And of course all the software. Toon Boom Harmony for the pony animation, all the character rigs in 2D were fully done in Toon Boom. Adobe Animate that did some very, very small Flash animation that I still use. Flash has some problems, it's very limiting, but it works. I also did the animatic. Since Flash is much faster to use than Toon Boom for that aspect, it's very, very helpful. After Effects for the compositing, the idea of layering all those aspects together to be able to put shadows, put depth of field, add the lighting, color correct all the aspects, put displacement, refraction, all the layering aspects was fully done in After Effects. Photoshop for the textures, for painting some of the aspects, for the for example the flyer. Adobe Premiere Pro for the editing. Blender for the 3D models, Maya for all the 3D models I did back on the beginning of Harmony and all the things I imported since. Arnold for the rendering for those sequences because I still use that. Render Pilot because I was using, since I have lots and lots of sequences, the idea of being able to queue all those renders and actually get all of them rendering within the night was very helpful. It allowed me to actually not have to start and stop renders. Just the idea of being able to queue those things just made the production so much easier. EBSynth, think of it like painting on a video. The whole idea is that you paint over an image and it transposes the movement of the video on top of it. So for example, if I needed to do a patch on top of a clip and couldn't just paint over the render, being able to do that in EBSynth made it so much easier. I've seen a lot of people do that to apply some effects on top of footage to try to make it stylized. For example, if you want a more painterly look to an image, it's just incredible. Reaper, not for me, but for Saf, as it was doing the sound mix for the project, which was incredible. And of course, made with no generative artificial intelligence. Generative artificial intelligence just doesn't work for my vision. It's plagiarized. It has lots of ethical concerns because of the amount of energy it uses just to plagiarize from other people. It's been used for so much bad stuff. So just the idea of, like, I wouldn't accept myself using generative AI for those things. So that's why I prefer to work all of that work just to get a project that feels personal, where I can get to control those aspects. I've already covered it before, but generative AI kills the artistic intent. I wouldn't find comfort in the idea of plagiarizing using those tools. It feels dirty.
Mail. So that kind of makes us co-workers.
Oh, that's one way to look at it.
And of course all my Patreon supporters. I'm trying to do those projects not for the money, but for the intent. This is a personal project that I want to show to other people. I want to entertain those people. I don't want it to be just for the money, but Toon Boom licenses cost money. The hardware to actually render those projects costs money. Paying voice actors costs money. So this costs money that those supporters really help with. YouTube is absolutely not a good source of revenue in monetization, partly just because it's not made to make us money, it's made to make them money. The fact that people are willing to help me with the project is very, very important. It means a lot to me to see that people are open to help me on those things, and I am very grateful for their help. Some of those people have been there for me for almost a decade, and it really means something for me when I work on something and they tell me how much it means to them. So I want to thank them for that help.
I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And yeah, I'd say it's a decade in the making, but it really depends on the definition. I've worked on the project for maybe 2 years. I can't say it's a decade in making because it didn't take a decade to make, but all the experience I've got was within the last decade, and the idea that I've learned so much within that decade means a lot. Within that decade, I ended up working for conventions, I ended up working for movie productions, did some television, I helped doing some live action collaborations. I've met a lot of talented people who taught me a lot about how to work in animation. I've learned so much. So this is a decade of experience that come from a vision that was very rough looking but still meaningful, that feels complete. So this was Bright Eyes in the Thunderclouds. It's been a very meaningful project for me. I'm talking about it today in part because I want to keep a record of me talking about it, because I feel like explaining a bit my thought process helps a lot. Explain a lot about the why the project is the way it is, but also it explains a lot the vision I have for my projects. Those are very meaningful stories to me that I want to share with people, and unfortunately, due to the way that YouTube is restricting comments, I am losing a way to communicate with other people. And I'm hoping this video is going to be helpful to describe my vision, why those projects mean a lot. I don't think just of animation as cartoons that are just there to entertain. This is a medium that is very, very helpful as a storytelling technique. This has lots of potential to allow creators to explain things that mean a lot to them. That's hard to capture with a camera, and I feel like this is a very, very important tool for people, and unfortunately YouTube thinks of it simply as a way to entertain kids, and I don't think it's just that. It's very powerful. I want to continue making those projects. I have lots of stories I want to tell. I have lots of visions that nowadays are very easy to democratize due to the fact that those tools to animate are available to people. I can actually make animation using a desktop computer I just bought as a store. It doesn't have that limitation that you had back in the days where making an animated production was just out of reach of people. This is very meaningful for me, and this is meaningful for a lot of people. This is why I want to keep making those projects. This is why I feel this is important. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching. I will eventually have news for future projects. I want to keep making those projects, and I want to make those with you. So if you like this video, I have a few recommendations. I have YouTube Shorts where I discuss animation. I have my socials where I have some previews. I have Patreon where I have some behind the scenes. And of course, I have YouTube. I'm definitely looking forward to future projects. I have no reasons to stop. This is very meaningful for me. This is very meaningful for other people. So with that, thank you for watching.